What's happening, everybody? That's Mikey as usual, and I'm Narby. It's time for another whiskey review. This is part 2 of our bourbon reviews. And as promised in the first review, when we did Pappy 15, we're going to do 4 collectible bourbons. And this one, unlike the other one, is not a sample. It is Booker's 25th anniversary. And how old is this whiskey, Mikey?
This is 10 years and 3 months old from a single batch. And it's 65.4% barrel strength. Or as they say in the US, 130.8 proof.
And this is the 25th anniversary release. When it first came out, I believe it was around $100 to $120 a bottle. It goes for quite a bit more now. It is a collector's item in an auction bottle. So without further ado, let's pour ourselves a dram and see what it's all about. As we talked about in the first review, high-end bourbons tend to not be aged as long as Scotch whiskeys. So this being a 10-year-old, it should be sufficient enough of aging for it to be considered a high-end product, where in the Scotch whiskey world, a 10-year-old whiskey tends to not be considered a premium product. Of course, in bourbons, they age them all the way up to 20 plus years as well. But a lot of people will complain about aging it too much when it comes to bourbon. So let's try this cask strength special release from Booker's and see what it's all about. It's got a very nice, rich, darkened mahogany color, and obviously bottled at an extremely high ABV. What did we say it was? At
65, over 65.
65.4%. So this is a beast.
Oh yeah, it's about as high as it gets. So, and Booker's is the high end of Jim Beam. Obviously, Jim Beam, the original Jim Beam 4 years old bourbon, very common. You can get it at any bar you want. Same company, but Booker's is the high end stuff.
At this strength, it's slightly closed up, and the flavor is very compacted. So it's asking for a little bit of water for it to just kind of release a little bit. But
yeah, the alcohol is mind blowing at 65.4%.
But I'm comfortably digging my nose in here without it being offensive in any way. It's giving me some almost like dark bread, some like rye bread.
This screams out like smoky barbecue sauce and ribs. The first note.
So some of that maple syrup that I pretty much get with almost every bourbon. It's chocolatey. It's nice and spicy. It's opening up. The flavors are releasing. It just needed to kind of sit in the glass for a little bit as I just poured it.
Oh yeah. I'm getting a lot of super roasted, like well done nuts. All kinds of nuts, but almost to the point of being burnt. Super roasted, but in a very pleasant way.
Kind of like when you said it's almost a little like ashy, like a little like rich barbecue sauce, like you said.
Yeah, well, almost like when you're grilling or barbecuing meat and you have a little char on it, you know, but it's not like it's burned. It's like it's necessary. It's got a little bit of that going.
It's also got some of those dark fruits in there as well.
Oh yeah. The beauty is, because you're starting at 65%, you're not going to miss anything that was created in the cask. You can always water it down, but all the flavors are in here. We just have to coax them out with air, with water. It's very complex.
If for me, at least right now, as it's sitting, I said we'll add some water to it. If I want to compare it to the Pappy Van Winkle 15-year-old, I'm not getting as complex of flavors. And again, it's just that at first nosing, the whiskey does need to breathe, and it definitely does need a little bit of water. But I'm gonna go ahead and drink this at this strength on the palate, just to kind of see how it is at cask strength. It's definitely strong, but it's doable. It's numbing at this alcohol. You know, you're gonna ruin your palate. You're gonna completely numb it if you drink a lot. I just took a tiny little sip, so my palate will be fine. But it just numbed everything right away. It's very drying, and I'm getting dark maple syrup, dark, brown sugar, some figs and some dates. Not as fruity on the palate. It probably does need some water to open up some of those fruit elements. And it's even, drying, a little leathery on the palate, and coming along with like ham and then barbecue and kind of like that, and the smokiness a little bit. Enjoyable, but definitely gonna add some water.
Yeah, no, it is really true what Narby said, that if you compare it to the Pappy Van Winkle 15-year-old that we did in our last review for the bourbons, it's definitely more singular, or not as complex, and more meat-based than, say, like meat and fruit and other elements based. There are definitely some fruits, but it is almost singular, like barbecue meats, different kind of meats. It is a little limiting in terms of the whole spectrum of flavors it could possibly be, versus the Pappy Van Winkle 15-year-old.
The nose, I obviously just added like half a teaspoon of water, and it's now much sweeter, fruitier, super sweet, corn rich.
Yeah, it's like taking corn on the cob and just drenching it in sweet butter. Definitely.
The kind of that bread, that rye element to it kind of is like going away a little bit when I added the water. It's going more really towards that rich sweetness, and I'll be honest with you, that's my one thing about bourbon, when it starts getting too sweet, as I talked about in the last review as well, is when the points start going down for me. It's a definitely a high-end product, and for the people that really enjoy that kind of sweetness, they're gonna love that part of it. But for me, it starts dropping a couple points because of that.
Yeah, like if you have a sweet tooth, and if you're gonna have a dram of this after a big, beautiful steak dinner with a cigar, and you really like, rich sweetness, this is probably perfect for you. But yeah, we're a little sensitive to that, and more into the Scotch for that reason.
Also, really, really like dark, sugar-covered raisins as well. Some sweet raisins. Even a hint of like burnt banana, like plantains, but like almost burnt.
Sure. Yeah, I'm getting I get a lot of the dark fruits, like the prunes, the raisins, the figs, the dates, but definitely compared to the Pappy Van Winkle 15, they're just way sweeter. than the Pappy Van Winkle 15, which is for me is a little off-putting.
Let's do one more sip with the addition of water.
Sure.
Still pretty intense. It's still high alcohol. I didn't have that much water. It's very drying, but in a very enjoyable way.
Oh yeah.
Like I really enjoy really dry wines. And this is, you know, if you like a dry whiskey, this is drying in that sense where it like takes the saliva in your mouth, dries it all up, and then as it's releasing, it starts getting juicy again. So that's my favorite aspect actually of the whiskey, is the mouthfeel and the play in that way. So it does score a couple extra points for that. Flavor wise, I am mainly getting rich sweetness and some of the barbecue elements and some of the meats that like that ham element and barbecue sauce, that sweetness, and a little bit of that raisin. Not getting a ton of complexity of fruitiness and stuff like that. Overall enjoyable, but not as enjoyable as the Pappy for me. The finish is nice and lingering. In terms of score, for me, I would give this, I don't know, somewhere in the probably 86 out of 100.
Ooh, mama.
Yeah.
I give it an 89. I obviously like it a little more than you.
Yeah, and you guys got to keep in mind, this is so important to keep in mind. We review some incredible whiskey, especially when we get just a miniature of something. The reason why we're getting the miniature is because it's a very expensive whiskey for probably a good reason. It's a high-end product. And so when we're trying these high-end bottles, the high-end miniatures and samples, you know, we're scoring whiskeys in the mid-90s and low 90s. Keep in mind, even when it comes to Scotch, the majority of Scotches that we try, we're not scoring them in the 90s. 90 is an excellent grade, and 86 is a B. You know, think of it that way. So
a high B. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm giving this a B. I'm not giving it a C- or anything like that. So keep that in mind. And for the bottles that we own, that we review, well, we do a lot of research and we know quite a bit about whiskey, so we're not just randomly buying bad bottles. You know, we have done that years and years ago, but we've mainly gone through those bottles that we score, let's say 75 or lower to, and we don't have a lot of those left to review. And we're not about to go spend money on bottles that we wouldn't score, you know, in the B and higher range. So just keep that in mind when we score something, let's say around 93, 94, it just means it's a mind-blowing experience. So when we have a lot of reviews in a row that are, let's say, like 93, 92, 94, 95, right around there, and then all of a sudden we do an 86, it's like, oh, he doesn't like it. No, I'm saying this is a very good whiskey. But you have to keep it in perspective in comparison to something that I score a 92 that I think is now an A whiskey. I'm not going to put it in that category for my taste profile. I think for someone who prefers bourbon over Scotch, it might be vice versa for them, you know? Just going with my taste buds. So please keep that in mind when we are scoring whiskey. This is an excellent score to give something an 86.
Yep.
All right, we'll see you guys for our third bourbon review next. Cheers.
Cheers.